Hi class, this is Professor Nick Sinsky at UNC Charlotte, and this is a demonstration of a simple schematic massing model using Rhinoceros. And we're going to go ahead and start with Autocad, since we last discussed how to make a measure drawing of your schematic design inside Autocad, so it seems to be a reasonable place to start. A lot of times you'll go from your 2D lines that you have in Autocad to a 3D model, just because you might start with the site and you might be working at diagrams in 2D. So that's one possible path, so I want to talk about that. And what I got here was a scheme that I worked on, and it's not really a real design, but it's just something I worked on using the geometry of the site and a few assumptions about the sort of scheme for like the crematoria. If you go ahead and turn off the layers that are in the AutoCAD file, start to get a sense of what my scheme is. The white lines represent kind of the outline of the building and some spaces in it, like I considered a stair and a skylight. This might be the chapel. Here's some service spaces. The magenta lines, to me, represent spaces that are like 2-story and spaces that are higher than 2 stories. So I have these ideas, these kind of details, and I'm going to be taking them in Rhinoceros to construct a basic kind of massing model. And massing model is a little bit different than the kind of mass model that you guys make out of foam core. I mean, mostly because it's digital, it allows us to kind of quickly make changes to it, to make variations, to make copies, and then to see, just to experiment with it. It also allows us later, we'll see, to place different cameras around it, so we can use that mass model to quickly construct axonometric views, take sections of it to create new orthographic drawings, and also just make 3D diagrams. And we'll be talking about that more later in the week, but for now, I just kind of want to talk about this idea of how to translate this drawing to a mass model and just some basic techniques for making mass models in Rhinoceros. So I have my file. I'm going to go ahead and export it so I can use it in Rhinoceros. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it and on my desktop, and I'm going to save it to, as I said before, probably an old AutoCAD file, so 2004 or an R14 DWG. You can also save it to a 2000 DXF, just an older file format, and save that to the desktop with a different name. And I do that again because there are all kinds of things in the newer versions of AutoCAD that don't really translate well to Rhinoceros. So it's important to basically save it as an old version. I'm going to go into Rhino. I'm going to import my file. It's actually going to be this alternate. And it's going to come in. And let's look at it for the top view. And you'll notice that all the layers come in, and they actually come in, the things that I have that are turned off, the things that I have are turned on, so that's actually kind of nice. Let's take a look at the scale of this. Use the dimension tool, using align dimension. If I zoom in, so that's 1003. It seems to be inches and not feet. So that's kind of a problem. What you can do to rectify that is either when you set the scale of it, you can actually open it as an inches file. So if I go into new and I do my template, I can say inches, which I don't prefer to do. Or what you could do is you could rescale it by 1/12, because again, it's in inches, we want it in feet. So what I can do is I can take the whole thing, actually turn on all the layers, first of all. And select everything, so select all. And I can say scale, take an origin point, and 1/12 is roughly 0.08. 3 repeating. And then let's take another measurement just to verify. 83 feet. That seems about right. And you could do something like you can measure, the path with an align tool and see that's like 15 feet. That's about right. So if that's a road or a path, that seems right. Measure a monument for 4.5 feet. So just want to be sure you're working in the right units, because as you go in with the tool, when you're making measured things, you want to make sure that everything is right. When you're extruding, you want to be sure you're getting the right heights for things. Okay, so I've got that, and I rescaled it, and so now everything is in regular units. So I can go ahead and start with that in my file, and I'm going to go ahead and save a copy of this since I've imported it and call this my mass model. Okay. Before we do that, though, I want to do a quick review of Rhino, and so I'm going to go ahead and select a bunch of layers and turn them off. Okay, so I'm on just the one layer now, and in Rhinoceros, if you guys remember, to pan, it's the right mouse button. To zoom is the mouse wheel. Okay, and I'm in top view, so I'm working orthographically. And a lot of the things that we're doing, we're going to do for this mass model, especially if we start with Rhino, if we start with Autocad, are going to be lines that we extrude. Okay, and I talked a little bit about this last time, but so if I take the rectangle tool, I can draw a shape, and I'm going to go into perspective view, and I'm going to say extrude curve, and I press enter. I say cap yes, delete input yes, and I can extrude the shape. If I change to shaded here, I see it as a solid. Okay, so again, taking a shape, say extrude curve. As long as my settings are for cap, I'm going to get a solid. I can also take any kind of a line, not a closed shape, and extrude this as a plane. And then lastly, I can take some kind of a shape that's closed, and that's on a plane that's flat, and I can make it into a planar surface, so a plane surf. Okay, so these are the basic kind of tools you might use for a massing model, just real shapes. Otherwise, what we can do is take the box tool and just simply, this is going to create the section, or the plane view and the mass. So the box just makes everything. So we can extrude curves, we can extrude lines to make planes, we can take planar closed curves to make a surface, and we can use the box. Okay, and that kind of thing can allow us just to quickly mass out some detail in our model. Go and delete these. Let's take a quick review again with align tools. So you could take your lines from AutoCAD, or since you're working on your second twin, you could begin actually massing things in AutoCAD, and in Rhinoceros, and you could do that by going to the rectangle tool, and you just specify first corner rectangle, fine, and then you can say the length of it. The length could be 50 feet, 50 apostrophe, and the width could be 100 foot, 100 apostrophe. Right? So that gives us our shape. You can also take lines, and you can say start a line, and with the next point, and this is getting into this thing about absolute versus relative coordinates. If I wanted the relative coordinate, let's say I want a line that is 50 foot tall, I could say R for relative, 0, 50 foot, so moving the Y, and then I could say next point, I could say R 25 foot, 0, let's do that, okay, and to finish it off, I could say R 0, negative 50 foot. And if I've got, you know, a line that's on, I could say close, and I'll close it. So using a line tool, I can create my sections. I can also go in, you know, I can make, I could do the same technique I showed you guys in class. I could say explode. I could say offset, 25 foot. It gives me an offset. I could say offset, 15 foot. And then I can do things like trim. And then join these back together again. So those kinds of techniques you can use, same kinds of things used in Autocad, or, you know, doing, you know, a series of regulating lines. So these are all going to be 15 foot. And again, I'm restarting the command by using the right mouse click. I think I talked about that last time. You can also use the enter key. And so I have a series of lines. Hold shift for orthogonal. Say offset. Distance D, 30 foot. And then using trim. I can trim these down to new shape. So once I have those, and I can begin to turn those into extrusions. So you can do most of the things you can do with lines. In fact, I would say everything you can do with lines in Autocad, you can do inside of Rhinoceros, and the commands are very simple. If you need to know there, you can just look them up under help. But again, like, you know, trim, extend, fillet, line, offset, those are all going to be Autocad commands. They're very, they're the same in Rhino. Let's go ahead and delete these. And then let's get back to our mass model. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know, select all these layers by holding shift, and then I turn on the layers and they all turn on. And let's see, I'm going to turn off a bunch of these though. The only things I'm really concerned about actually are this layer 1, layer 2 for now. And so I've got these pieces, and I can do a couple other things. I'm actually going to go ahead, I'm going to work in perspective view from the top view. Okay. And it's important when you're extruding to make sure, if you're extruding up and down, you want to start from the top view, so top, and then perspective. Otherwise, when you extrude, it uses whatever the last coordinate plane was as the extrusion, and so if you started from the right or the left view or the front or back, it's not going to extrude up and down. It's going to extrude, you know, inside or outside. It's going to extrude in the X or the Y. If it happens, you'll know it because it won't work the way you want it to. So a technique that I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go ahead and add a layer called massing. And I'm going to go ahead and lock these. So lock, LCK. And I'm going to do that because when I'm in Autocad, I'm not always making closed shapes. I'm not always aware of the things that they're not full shapes. They might be a couple of segments. Maybe these aren't joined together. And what I want to do is in Rhino, I want to use these as an underlay, and I want to use my snaps, my endpoint snaps, to basically redraw them or trace them so that I get exactly what I want. Okay, and it'll make more sense as we go on. So I'm going to go ahead and just start massing this out, and you know, like, let me go ahead. I could use the box tool, or I could start with a polyline, and I could begin to draw things, or I could use a combination of those. And I mean, actually, the way my building works, the way that I envision it, is it's got a kind of a main hallway and then a stair in the center, and this is all kind of single story, and then it's got a second story piece here, and then a chapel that's actually 2.5, or like 3 stories. So I'm going to go ahead and actually start my chapel and do them, make a box, and I'm going to snap to Actually, I need to change my layers. Let's say set current to massing. Take my box. And using endpoint snaps, I'm going to snap to my chapel. Ooh, actually, I need to make a polyline instead. Because it's actually angled. If I go to the top, you can see it's slightly angled. So, polyline it is. So, I'm going to draw. And again, I'm doing this seems redundant, but I'm doing it because if I do it this way, I know exactly the shape bounds of the object that I want, and I'm not depending upon the Autocad lines. So in order to determine whether it's closed or not, and I'm going to say cap yes, and I'm going to say delete input. That gets rid of the curve that I used to generate it, and I'm going to extrude this. I'm going to assume that the ceilings are maybe 10 foot, and so let's say that this space I want to say is actually going to be 40 foot high. Like the chapel is going to have extremely high, an extremely high ceiling. Maybe 36 foot. This is actually what's nice about the mass model is that you know you can kind of fudge things, and you can you know make sort of quick kind of judgments about it. And the other piece I'm going to do is I'm going to take an outline of this space, which are these kind of service spaces here. And this is what I envisioned are kind of the waiting room and some of the crematoria and things like that. Bathrooms and things are going to be along this piece. And this is actually just going to be a single story. So I'm going to say extrude, and you know these I might say, you know, maybe 12 foot, maybe 10 foot, maybe 12 with surfaces. So it's 12 foot. And then my chapel. And then if I go to wireframe, I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to make my second story. And my second story piece is actually going to be this is the stair. And my second story is going to be, let's take my polyline here. I'm going to snap the base here. Okay, I've got this piece, and that's actually the second story, so I'm going to move vertical, yes, and I'm going to move it from 0Z to the top of that, so now it's at a height of 12 foot. Again, move it, click vertical, yes, and click it, and move it out. And then this piece I'm going to extrude, let's say another 12 foot. So I've got that. If I look at it again, this is actually what's going to take place in it. Actually makes me think that my stair is like far too long for this space. I've kind of misjudged it, so I may need to go back and redesign that. Okay, let's see here. What are the other pieces I have? I've got my atrium space, which is kind of outside the chapel. It creates an open space here. You know, the way, I mean, I can model it to the polyline again, snapping. And I kind of have a choice here when I extrude it. Is it going to be the same height? I can snap to here. Is it going to be as high as my chapel? So this is what's nice about the mass model versus, you know, foam core models or whatever, is I can make these kind of decisions. I can kind of look at these options. I think it's actually going to be as high as this. I think the chapel, there's a hierarchy here of starting low, going up to the second story, and then having this this kind of atrium, and then the chapel's the tallest space. Actually not quite, because the other piece of this that I'm going to make is actually going to be the crematoria itself, and it's going to be this year. It's going to be kind of like a smokestack. So I'm going to create this polyline. I drew a polyline here, which I'm going to extrude up to this height. And then I'm actually going to take that edge, so I'm going to go into curve from objects, and I'm going to grab the border of it, so that if I pick the top piece of it, actually it wants everything, so let's just go ahead and explode this actually. Okay, let's duplicate border, take the top piece, so that gives me a curve, and then I'm going to go ahead and move it vertically, yes, from the point. It doesn't want to do that. Let's see here. Move vertically, yes. Depends on what view you're in, so if I go to top view, change the perspective. Wow, okay, let's try that again. So let's say duplicate the border, already did that. Move vertically, yes. Yeah, so now, yeah, the last view you're in, it uses that plane. So we want to be from top view to this view, and then I'm actually going to move this. So the height of this is 30. I think I'm going to do it to 60. Doesn't seem right, actually. Let's go ahead. Let's go to the right-hand view. And I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to move it from this point to that point. And I'm going to take this line as a move, vertically, yes. Shoot, I need to be top view. Move, vertically, yes. Click on the point. So I just use that to kind of create, just so I have a space that's double height. If you know what this is, you could just move it to that height, but I did it visually. And then we go ahead and say, I'm going to draw a line across this, draw midpoint snaps, and I'm going to scale this object to be half that size, so 0.5. Okay, so I have a curve that I had from here, and I moved it up and I scaled it. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to open my surface panel up. And surface says make a surface from edge curves, so I can click on the edge, and then this piece, actually explode this there, because I want my edges, so surface from two edges, click that, and then restart the command with the right mouse click, finish that off, start the command, let's take the edge, restart the command, oops, restart the command again, finish that off, and then I could go in and I could say, well, and basically I could create a surface from planar curve. I could just pick those edges. It's going to finish me off. So I have this kind of crematoria stack as a primary vertical element. And then lastly, I've kind of got the circulation piece, so I'm going to go ahead and take my polyline and trace this up. Should go to wireframe. And if you're having trouble snapping to things in plan, I would turn on project, and that's going to project all lines to the coordinate plane, which is 0, z. And so again, I'm kind of so even here, this is interesting. So I can snap to, even if I use this, I can snap to the end of it. And that's what that does. You can snap to things. in different coordinate planes, and they'll actually drop to z0. So I have this line, and I can extrude it. And this is actually interesting too. Like I could look at this. Actually, I need to turn off project now. I could look at this as, you know, an element that's actually taller than these, or that's the same height as this space. You know, what's it going to be? Is it going to be kind of a channel between them? Is it going to be the same height? Or maybe midway between those two? That's actually kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know. This is actually exactly what math studies are good for. So that is a very, very basic math study of my building. And again, I just traced, you know, the lines from my building and extruded them using extrude curve. You know, here I did a little bit of complicated stuff with my to make this kind of smokestack, but you know that could just as easily just be a really tall square extrusion or rectangular, and then you could ask me later, you know, how to make a particular piece of geometry. You know, this I actually might want to go ahead and join together. So pick all these with shift. You know, just generally kind of join them together if you want to. Just to make it easier to select some of these later. So join. So now that's one surface. So that's an idea for my building there. And you could study that. You know, you could study the different heights of things, but this is kind of helpful to imagine it in elevation from different views. And we'll talk about this later in the week. So that's one piece of it. The other piece that, you know, might interest you is actually to begin to study these things just as planes and actually use those inside of your mass model. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this other layer floors. And I'm going to turn off the layer for mass model. So set this current, turn this off. Again, these are all locked. And I could take the polyline tool. And if I've got two pieces, and I make them a planar curve, that actually makes them, it's hard to tell until I go shade it, but that's actually a surface with an opening in it. And that might give me, you know, I could use that as a plane. And the other piece of this that I could do would be to take something like a draw my other second floor, but with an opening, you know, for a stair. Let me go ahead and turn this off here. Okay, and this actually makes a good point for this. So I'm gonna go ahead and hide this. So hide. Maybe you can temporarily turn things off by hiding them. And let's extend this line here. And I'm doing that because if I extend makes it perpendicular, you know, it actually keeps the angle correct because I want these to be parallel lines. So I drew a line there, and then let's copy this line to the midpoint of this line. And then I'm going to trim these. Okay, so now I've got, you know, these planes. And then I'll take this and join these together. And then make a planar surface. So show, get the other one back. So I've got these, and you know I could go back to my massing model and look at these, and well, let's look at these maybe ghosted, and I can lock my masses. And what if I took this, you know, and I say move vertical. And actually, I mean, I could go in. Well, we'll talk about later, but I could actually add that to my mass model. And then let's take this other piece here, and let's move it vertically. Here. And so now I've actually got, you know, these things to the proper heights they want to be. Let's go ahead and delete these actually. We don't need them anymore. And let's go polylines. And I'm actually just drawing the entire first floor. Notice you can actually rotate around as you're drawing. So it's really strong. And I've got this outline. And I've got the planar surface. Let's go shaded. And so now I've really got this idea about this kind of skylight, and seeing that this is a second floor. I mean, in fact, really, I mean, these are the different kind of floors, and this is the first floor, this is the second floor. The piece that's missing is the staircase. And you know, we can actually, you know, we can make the staircase, or we could make kind of a just kind of a mass model of that. So what I could do is I could take the polyline tool and let's just go to top view and project, and let's just draw the outline of this. And remember, project is actually going to project into the coordinate plane, so we have a curve here. And a really easy thing I could do would be just to take that thing where I make a surface from two edge curves. Let's explode this. And then let's take this edge. Oops, don't do that. Let's take this edge. Let's turn on the curve tool, and now let's just take these two. And that just gives you a suggestion of a stair. And then you really could just go and delete this stuff. And so that's a really, really, really basic kind of floor model, just to kind of show you, give the idea of that circulation in the space. And then if I turn on the sub-mass model here, let's go in. I need to unlock this. Let's go in and take this, explode it. Let's delete the top of this, and then show that. So now I've actually got that skylight in there. And let's take the skylight and let's add it to, go to F3. Let's put that on the massing layer. And let's actually go into the floors layer and change the color of the floors just so we can see them better. Just make them, let's make them red. Okay, and now if we go into something like X-ray, maybe ghosted, we can begin to get a sense, just really roughly, I mean really roughly, of what the inside of the space is like, and how these might actually work. And again, this is rough. I mean, just kind of simple cubes and things, but it's actually starting me to think about the way the circulation works. You know, is it a high space? Is it a low space? Like, how do these things kind of join together? How do my floors work? So this is the kind of thing that you'd want to do at this point, just to kind of study your design. I'm gonna go ahead and save this too. You really want to be saving often. So there's that piece, and then just to kind of take a segue here, we'll start a new model. So I want to show you a couple of techniques. So that's, you know, if you were working in CAD, That's one thing. But there's also kind of a school of thought that says that you want to be, maybe thinking about your massing as you're working in 3D to actually design your building. And so I'm going to talk about some different methods. We talked about lines and how you can use 2D lines and then make them 3D. You can also do some 3D operations, and I just want to talk about these. So, let's say you had a building, and I'm just going to make some masses. So I've got the rectangle tool. So you can do things like taking these things, and in the computer, these things kind of run through each other, and if you render it, it seems like they're actually all part of the same object, but they're really not. I mean, they're really separate. But what if you wanted to make them one thing, right? So that you could consider it as one space. That's really how the building is anyway, right? So you can do what we call additive modeling. You're adding things together. And one way to do that really simply is with booleans. And I talked about these and how dangerous they are, but in this case, they're going to work pretty easily. So let's say boolean union. And a union is actually when you kind of merge objects together. So we click them all and say enter. And now if you look at it, you don't see these things actually running through each other. You see that they've disappeared. So if I explode this and take this top, you can actually see that that's what has happened. And it creates all the pieces and things. But that may be interesting. You may take your mass model at some point and begin to union the different spaces together if that's what you intend. So like additive modeling, works pretty well. And additive modeling really works with pretty much anything. So I can take something that's round and something that's square, and I can union them together. Boolean union. And so again, these are actually within themselves a space. And then it has kind of repercussions for your design. So like, again, to kind of consider these as one unit is interesting. The other kind of modeling is subtractive modeling. And there's lots of different things that you can do with that. So I can take something at the top view, and I could draw a shape, and then I could extrude it. This is something too, right? You can use your 2D shapes along with your 3D shapes. And so the subtractive modeling is you can do a Boolean difference. And so I can say take the first set and then press enter, and then take the second set and press enter, and it's going to remove that piece. And that can be interesting. You can do it the opposite way. I can say this is the first and this is the second, and I can remove that piece. So there's lots of different potential with something like that. And so imagine that the axes on your site create gaps in your building. And these are mass models, these are studies, so these kinds of things are perfectly, they don't have to be pictorial or actually what your building is, they're more about the idea of the building. You can do it with multiple objects too, so you can say the first object is this, the second set are these, and it would remove those from your building. Just to say you could do this. And then do something like this. And so these are all actually, excuse me, these are all one object. You can begin to do things with that. So lots of interesting combinations, and we'll talk about this in class. But another thing you can do is to take your massing model. This is just, let's assume this is your model, and you can do a thing called a wire cut. And so let me just make a line. And you take your thing and say wire cut, and the cutting curve would be this. And the surface, is your object, and you can pull this thing through at a certain depth, and then it says, part to cut away, and then actually go just cut out the piece of something. So it works kind of like a Boolean, but you can do it with a section of something. And you can wire cut with actually something all the way through as well. And you could use this to cut away the top or bottom or something. So I could go in the right view, move it up a bit, and then I could say wire cut, curve, surface, curve, surface. And see, this is again the last view that you had is the coordinate plane. So now I'm in, okay, so wire cut, curve, surface. So just like a hot wire that you take through a foam model. And again, you can measure where this is coming through, how high it is, and you can begin to cut that out. So this could all be a space, but it's a space that's different heights of things. Okay. So you can use those kinds of tools, those kinds of techniques to create more complicated study models for your massing. Let's go back to the model here. Yeah, lost my file. There we go. So again, here's our model. And we'll do some studies later of both of these, but again, it's nice because this thing actually has the kind of the floors that are inside the model, and the spaces in the model, and you could do something. Right now, it's nice to have these spaces separate, but you could certainly go in later in another part and begin to see what happens when you start to blend them together, or begin to use subtractive modeling to change what goes on inside your spaces. Okay, so let's just stop there, and want you for Tuesday take these techniques and create a mass model of one of your schemes, either the scheme you're working on or the scheme that you just worked on, just so you have something that you can model. And it just doesn't have to be, again, this is all the amount of detail that it really has to have. It's just really about extruding the planes you have and adding that third dimension. And then if you want to, refining that dimension with some subtractive operations or some additive operations. Okay, let's go ahead and stop there, and I'll see you guys in class on Tuesday.